Your first reading assignment will be from The Golden Bough, which was written by this man whom you see here, Sir James Frazer. Sir James Frazer is one of the most famous and one of the most powerful scholars who has ever lived. He published The Golden Bough over 100 years ago, and it has never been out of print. That means for over 100 years, people have continuously been purchasing and reading copies of The Golden Bough. And Sir James Frazer has had an impact on everything they believe about God, about the supernatural, about Jesus Christ and Muhammad and Indra and Shiva and Vishnu, about black cats, about Ouija boards. This guy is the man, world famous, very influential. And he's not just influential in the field of anthropology. There are authors and painters and filmmakers who have been influenced by the works of Sir James Frazer. The Golden Bough has been published several times, and it's being printed today, and people are buying new copies today. The first edition came out in 1890. Sir James Frazer continued his work, and one edition consisted of 12 volumes. That's right, every volume that you see there is a volume of the one book, The Golden Bough. And I'm not going to ask you to read all 12 volumes. I'm only going to ask you to read about 50 pages from The Golden Bough. And I do want you to read those pages, and I do want you to convince me that you've read them. He's a huge name. He's an academic superstar. He's very influential. Polish anthropologist Bronisław Malinowski read The Golden Bough and said, "No sooner had I read this great work than I became immersed in it and enslaved by it. I realized then that anthropology, as presented by Sir James Frazer, is a great science, worthy of as much devotion as any of her elder and more exact studies. And I became bound to the service of Frazerian anthropology." So in other words, Malinowski, who is himself a hugely influential scholar, is saying that an intelligent person could benefit from dedicating their entire life to anthropology because it has so much to offer people about understanding the human mind and human activity and the human soul. Why do people do what they do? Sir James Frazer claims that he can answer that question with his book, The Golden Bough. Another author wrote, "He has changed the world, not as Mussolini has changed it, with colored shirts and castor oil, nor as Lenin has changed it, boldly emptying out the baby of the humanities with the filthy bathwater of Tsarism, nor as Hitler with the fanfaronade of physical force. He has changed the world by altering the chemical composition of the cultural air that all men breathe." So even if you've never heard of Mussolini or Lenin or Hitler, I'll tell you who they are. They're people who change the world with physical force, with weapons, with guns. And this person is saying that Sir James Frazer changed the world with a book, The Golden Bough. He discovered why you believe what you do. I want you to think about yourself right now. What do you believe? Do you believe in God? Do you practice a religion? Do you tell stories about your ancestors? Do you believe those stories? Do you not believe in God? Are you an atheist? Are you an agnostic? Do you believe that if a black cat crosses your path, you will have bad luck? Do you believe that through a Santeria ceremony, you can bring more money into your life? Do you believe that your thoughts can change what happens in your life? Sir James Frazer claims that he can explain these beliefs to you. Part of Frazer's appeal was his shy, donnish character. Don means an academic, a professor, a scholar. Frazer was a shy man who lived at home, did not travel, only ever went to Italy. He was Scottish, so he's lived most of his life in Scotland. And he worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's how he managed to publish a 12-volume book. So he is an academic superstar. Now, what are the facts you need to know about Sir James Frazer? I want you to know that he lived during the 19th and 20th centuries. You don't have to remember the exact years, 1854 to 1941. But I want you to know that he lived during the 19th and 20th centuries. He lived during the Victorian era, and you need to understand the Victorian era. So bear with me. Who is this Victoria person? She's Queen Victoria. Before Queen Elizabeth, the current queen, she was the longest reigning monarch in British history. She ruled for almost the entire 19th century, so that's the 1800s. She was the Queen of England. During her reign, life changed dramatically for British people. If you were born at the beginning of her reign in like the early 1800s, you probably lived the way people lived 2,000 years ago. You didn't have electricity, you didn't have running water, you may have had a dirt floor, you were probably a farmer or somehow associated with agriculture, and your life was miserable, and you probably died around age 40. Towards the end of her reign, there are trains and there's steamship travel and there are street lights and the telephone and telegraph and movies are all on the way. Life changed dramatically during Victoria's reign. So this is an age of great discovery and modernization. What else do you need to know about the Victorian era? The sun never set on the British Empire. England, that tiny little country in the upper center of the map, a tiny little country that's red above France, which is blue. England controlled much of the globe. The United States used to be a British colony. Canada, Greenland, much of the northern part of South America used to be British territory. A large chunk of Africa, you can see on the map there, the eastern part of Africa was largely British territory. Much of the Middle East was British territory. India, the entire Indian subcontinent, was British territory. A lot of East Asia, Burma, was British territory. Australia, New Zealand, and Hong Kong, which is now part of China, all under British control. So Queen Victoria's reign, the two things you need to remember about Queen Victoria's reign is that it lasted a long time, it was a time of great modernization, oops, three things, and that the sun never set on the British Empire. Now something happened in the middle part of the 19th century, that is the 1800s. A guy by the name of Charles Darwin published a book called On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. And this book had a huge impact in Victorian England. Before Darwin published his book, many people believed that God created the world, as described in the book of Genesis, which is the first book in the Jewish Bible. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and a darkness was upon the face of the water, and the Spirit of God moved upon the water. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And as you run through the book of Genesis, God creates fish and birds and reptiles and trees and plants and human beings, Adam and Eve. And people believed that all of creation was the result of God saying, "Let this exist." Strictly through the power of his voice, God created the world ex nihilo, out of nothing. Ex nihilo, that's Latin for out of nothing. Now, this is the Jewish Bible. Christians accepted this teaching, and the book of Genesis became part of the Christian Bible. So you have Jews and Christians believing about God creating the world in this way. Muslims are influenced by the Jewish Bible, and Muslims also believe that God created the world out of nothing. But this guy Darwin has come along, and Darwin said that creation didn't involve God, that it was just a single-celled animal that slowly but surely evolved into all the animals we see today. And here we have the tree of life as believed and as described by Darwin. And Darwin never said that you have to be an atheist if you want to believe in my book. But many people, after reading his book, did become atheists. And so religious belief in the British Empire, which is a good big chunk of the world, during the 19th century, decreases. Religious belief decreases, and more people are becoming atheists and saying, I don't really believe in God. I just believe in this Darwinian concept of evolution, that life it takes its own path and there's no divine hand involved. But remember, the sun never sets on the British Empire. This is a map of the world that shows territories that either have been colonized by England or that were part of the British Empire during Victoria's reign. And so as the British people are traveling into their empire, they're encountering people who are not Christian and not Jewish and never read Darwin, and who have their own religions and their own belief system. We're going to talk about 3 groups of people who travel with the British Empire. The first group of people are the merchants. For example, the East India Company, that goes to India. The merchants, they're going to India so that they can buy and sell. And they want to make a profit. And so they're paying a lot of attention to the religious beliefs of the people that they are visiting, because they want to be able to buy and sell successfully. And there are a lot of Muslims in the Indian subcontinent, and Muslims do not eat pork. So the merchants who want to buy and sell are not going to bring pigs and try and sell the pigs to the Muslims because they don't eat pork. So the merchants are paying a lot of attention to the religious practices of the people they're visiting, and they're writing down accounts, and they're sending these accounts back to England. Another group of people who are traveling with the British Empire are missionaries. The missionaries are Christian and they want to spread the Christian religion. And in order to be successful in their attempts to spread the Christian religion, they need to understand the religion of the people that they are missionarizing. And so they're copying down the religious practices and the words and the vocabulary and the beliefs of the people that they are visiting. And they're sending these reports back to England. So we've got two groups of people sending reports back to England. The first group is the merchants, and the second group is the missionaries, and the third group is the military. The military also wants to be successful, and they don't want to alienate or hurt the feelings of the people they control. And there was an example in India where there was a rumor that the British military was greasing bullets with fat from cows. And to Hindu people, cows are sacred, and they would never want to use bullets that had been greased with cow fat. And there was another rumor that the bullets were actually greased with the fat from pigs. And the Muslims in the Indian subcontinent would never want to handle bullets that had been greased with the fat from pigs. And so the military people are also writing down accounts of local religious customs and beliefs, and they're sending all those accounts back to England. And these merchants, missionaries, and military people are encountering Hinduism, and they're encountering Islam, and they're encountering traditional religions, and they're sending all these accounts back to England. Now, this is not a picture of Sir James Frazer. This is a painting of what's known as an armchair scholar. An armchair scholar is a scholar who reads reports written by people in the field. Remember, Sir James Frazer himself, he did not travel. He stayed at home in Scotland, and he read all these accounts of merchants, missionaries, and military people. And he compiled all these accounts together into the Golden Bough, 12 volumes of the Golden Bough. And he felt that he had the ability to explain the thoughts of people who lived thousands of miles away from him, whom he himself never met, never interviewed, never had anything to do with. And you're going to read 50 pages from his book. And I do want you to read every last page as I did, and it's a lot, and it's going to take you a long time, but it's a very influential book, and I want you to read it. And I want you to, in your summary, let me know if you understand Sir James Frazer's two different kinds of magic. He's going to talk about two different kinds of magic. You're going to see Sir James Frazer give example after example after example after example from all over the world. And I want you to include some of those examples in your summary. And then Sir James Frazer, towards the end of the selection, is going to tell you what he thinks about traditional people. And I want you to tell me in your summary, what does Sir James Frazer think of traditional people?